In today's lesson, we'll be looking at the addition and subtraction of complex numbers. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification bell so that when we release a new video, you're going to be the first person to be notified. Now, let's set the ball rolling. So first, we are going to tackle the addition part of complex numbers. Now, when we talk of the addition of complex numbers, then it goes this way. Now, let's assume we have the complex number a plus bi, and it's been added to another complex number c plus di. So once you are summing, then you have to consider these two things. First, you are going to sum the real parts, and the real part here is a and c, so that becomes a plus c. And then we also sum the imaginary parts, that is bi plus di. Now, we can maintain the real part, that becomes a plus c, and we factorize the imaginary number I out, and that becomes b plus di. So basically, this is how we add complex numbers. Now, let's take examples on the addition of complex numbers. So we have here as example 1, and example 1 says that if z1 is equal to 6 minus 4i and z2 is equal to 1 plus 6i, find z1 plus z2. Now, we have our solution as such, and we have been given that of z1 and z2. So we just add z1 plus z2. Now, z1 was given us 6 minus 4i plus z2 giving us 1 plus 6i. Now, once we have this, we are just going to add the real part to the real part and the imaginary part to the imaginary part. So first, the real part. The real part here is 6 and 1. So you have 6 plus 1, nicely written as this. And then we also add the imaginary part to the imaginary part. That becomes minus 4i plus 6i. So here, when 6 is being added to 1, we have 7, and minus 4 plus 6 gives us plus of 2i. So when z1 has been added to z2, then our answer becomes 7 plus 2i. So that is example 1 on the addition of complex numbers. Now we are moving to example 2. Now example 2 is basically the same parameters just like example 1. And it says that z1 is equal to 6 minus 4i and z2 is equal to 1 plus 6i. We should find minus z2 plus z1. Now you're going to have our solution here. And the question is saying minus z2 plus z1. So it means the negative of z2, and z2 is the same thing as 1 plus 6i. And then it's been added to z1, 6 minus 4i. Once we have this, then you're going to have as minus 1 minus 6i. And then the other part becomes 6 minus 4i. So the next step is to group like terms, just like we grouping the real part to the real part and the imaginary part to the imaginary part. So minus 1 plus 6 here, and we have minus 6i minus 4i. So basically, we can see that minus 1 plus 6 gives us 5, and minus 6i minus 4i gives us minus of 10i. And this is how we add minus z2 plus z1 in the addition of complex numbers. Now, once we understand this, we are moving next to the subtraction of complex numbers. With the subtraction of complex numbers, we are taking into consideration two complex numbers, of which the first one here is a plus bi, and then the next one is minus that of c plus di. So here, we can see that the minus is affecting the second complex numbers. So we maintain the first one, that is a plus bi, and then we expand the next one, that is minus c minus di. So here we have to group like terms, such as we grouping the real parts and then the imaginary parts. So the real parts, we have a minus c, and then with the imaginary parts, we have plus bi minus di. So here we can put them in parentheses. That becomes A minus C. Then we have plus B minus DI. And this is how we subtract complex numbers. Now, if we get this ideology, then let's put this idea into practice by solving practical examples. Now, let's move to example 1. So we have here as example 1, and it says that if we have Z1 to be equal to 3 plus 5i and Z2 to be equal to 10 minus 2i, we should find Z2 minus Z1. Now we have our solution here. We are looking for Z2 minus Z1. And we can see that Z2 here is 10 minus 2i being subtracted from 3 plus 5i. So we have this. Now the next step here is to expand the left hand side by taking into consideration the minus. So this becomes minus 3 minus 5i. So when we expand this, we have that. Now we are going to group items. So the real part first, that becomes 10 minus 3, and then the imaginary part minus 2i minus 5i. So what we have to do here is that we simplify, that becomes 7, and then we have here as minus 7i. And this becomes our solution to this question. Now, we move to the next example, that is example 2, under the subtraction of complex numbers. Example 2 is just like the same parameters, but with a different question. So we have Z1 to be equal to 3 plus 5i and Z2 to be equal to 10 minus 2i. We want to find minus Z1 minus Z2. So we should have our solution as that. And we are looking for minus Z1 minus Z2. So what we are going to look at is to assign minus to Z1, and that is minus 3 plus 5i. And then there is minus of Z2, that becomes 10 minus 2i. Now we have to expand. So this becomes minus 3 minus 5i. And then have you as minus 10 plus of 2i. Now once this is done, then we have to group items. So the real parts come in first. That becomes minus 3 minus 10. And we have here as the imaginary minus 5i plus of 2i. So once this is done, then we should have minus 13. And then we have here as minus of 3i. So this is how we solve examples under the subtraction of complex numbers. Now, since this video is about the addition of and subtraction of complex numbers, then we end our video here. So thank you for watching. Kindly like, comment, you subscribe, and share. Remember that this is BakoMaths, thinking beyond infinity. See you in our next video.